The 1 acre plus home market does perform differently than the overall market. And if you make decisions about your 1 acre plus home based on overall market data or market data that really is applicable to subdivisions, then you're going to make some decisions that may not be in your best interest. So we're going to cover in this video the information that covers 1 acre plus homes, the data, the statistics for homes on an acre or more. In the first quarter of 2026, now everybody was excited about 2026, and we're going to look at what has happened in the first quarter, not just the first month or the second month, but the first quarter of 2026. And it kind of points to what's happening right now. A lot of people are excited about 2026, and for good reason. But let's find out if that excitement has been validated. Let's take a look. The first thing everybody wants to know is what's going on with prices. Well, we're going to get to that. We're going to start with the first quarter sales, the number of homes on an acre or more that sold in the first quarter of 2026. And that was a big positive, 16.5% increase. Now that's a pretty strong increase, well into double digits. So what we've been seeing in 1 acre plus stats for a few years, year over year, from month to month, quarter to quarter, year to year, has been fairly negligible. There hasn't been a lot of change. There have been in certain instances, but overall, it's been fairly plodding. It just plods along. And this particular quarter, first quarter of 26, saw a nice substantial change. 16.5% more sales of homes on an acre or more than a year ago in the first quarter of 2025. That's a big positive. Now we're going to look at some buyer demand stats. Days on the market. The days on the market went up considerably. Now this is in red. Typically negative is in red, positive is in green, but the positive, in other words, the increase in days on market, is a negative. So that's why it's in red. So it did take longer for homes to sell on an acre or more than it did in the first quarter of 2025. So 26 saw that longer time on the market, and it was substantially longer, as you can see, well over 100 days. It was about 123 days on the average, and that's right about 4 months if you remember your high school math. Now again, that's not terrible. That's not a super down market, but it's just not very good compared to what we're used to in Central Texas. And I don't just mean a few years ago when the market was super hot. I mean from 2012 on, all the way up to 2019 and 2020 before that big run up in values hit. Now, another buyer demand ratio that we see is what are buyers willing to pay compared to asking price? Well, we saw that drop about 1.63%. Now, that's about $13,000 less in a home seller's pocket just because of the negotiation in the market. Buyers are paying about 1.3% less compared to asking price than they were a year ago. So we saw the big positive, more sales, but now we're seeing the negatives. Buyer demand stats are showing that buyers are in a little more control. And this is another one that indicates that it's looking like a buyer's market. It's feeling like a buyer's market, even though statistics don't necessarily say that. 3.32% change in price changes. What do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is simply that when a home goes in the market, the price was lowered 3.32% more than a year ago before a home sold. So on the average, homes saw 3.3% more in price reductions than they did a year ago. So we've seen 3 negative stats regarding what's going on in the 1 acre plus market. Now I'm going to throw this into you because it matters more now than ever before. A home that's placed in the market, even in what seems like a plodding, slower market, if it's priced right and doesn't have to have the price changed, it sells higher, sells closer to asking, see a misspelling there, sorry about that, and it sells faster. So when the home is priced so that it does not have to have any price reductions, it will net the seller more money at closing. It will sell faster. It's proven month after month, year after year, decade after decade. And it's true especially in this market. Now, these look negative, but I'm going to share with you that I think they're positives. Here's why. The original price, what does that mean? Well, when a homeowner puts their home on the market, there's an average price across the board that that home is put on the market. Now I'm talking about 1 acre plus homes, not homes overall. So when a homeowner puts their home on the market, then they end up lowering their price to get it sold, and then they negotiate off of the price. There's a differential that can be pretty substantial. This shows that homeowners place their homes on the market at 4% less on the average than a year ago. So what does that mean? Why is that positive? Well, what it means is that the market has corrected. We saw a run up in values in a frenzied, crazy, bizarre market in 21 and half of 22. And we've been correcting ever since. But what we haven't seen is sellers accepting that as a whole. Some sellers, yeah. But many sellers are still grasping for those higher prices, even though the corrections in the last 4 years, have not taken the values down anywhere near where they were before that frenzy went up. I've got a video on here that shows that most homeowners made 6 figures in equity because of that run up, even though prices have settled. But what this shows is that sellers are willing to price their homes more realistically than they were a year ago. Now, here's one you're not going to like, but again, I believe this is a little bit positive. The average price of a sale in the first quarter of 26 compared to 25 was nearly 9% less than a year ago. So homeowners priced their homes about 4% less than they did a year ago, and they sold them for about 9% less than they did a year ago. Why in the world, and how could that be positive? Well, because it shows that homeowners are accepting the reality of the market and getting their homes sold. And when they do that, what happens? More home sales. And that puts us on track to return to a normal market. So just the simple fact that sellers are being more realistic in their initial price, being more realistic in their sales price, we're seeing more home sales. And that's a good thing. Now, here's a big one. In 2026, the first quarter, we saw 90% more homes removed from the market than a year ago. Again, I believe that's kind of a good thing. Again, homes that are priced unrealistically and are unwilling to move toward reality are coming off the market, and that is good for the market. I'm going to go back to the average price going down 9%. I don't mean that you can decide that, hey, my value has dropped 9%. That's not necessarily the case. What it means is that in the 1 acre plus market, the average of the homes that sold was 9% less than a year ago. Now, I want you to understand, this doesn't mean that overall every home fell 9%. The market, the average price for homes on an acre or more was 9% less than a year ago. But if you bought a home and you're improving it and you're updating it and you're maintaining it beautifully, you may not be in the same position as somebody who isn't doing that. I hope that makes sense. And if you're willing to take the time and effort to prepare your home for sale and do it well, you may not see the same kind of decrease in value that your neighbor did. But I'm going to go back to those negative stats that I think are positive. Homeowners are putting the homes on the market at more realistic prices, and they're negotiating to more realistic contracts. That increases the number of sales, and that gets the market moving. I expect any negative stats at this time next year will be far less than what you saw today. And that certainly could even be the case for the next quarter. So I'm just going to throw another video up here. This video talks about how to properly prepare your home for sale, how to follow a process that very few agents are going to share with you. But if you'll watch this, if you're thinking about selling, you're going to appreciate what it has to offer you. Thanks for watching, and remember, it's your choice, so make it a powerful day.